Spoštovane učiteljice in učitelj, sem videla enega gospoda, ja. Dobrodošli na četrti konferenci Zabavni s tem kot inovativno učno okolje. Današnja konferenca je posvečena raziskovanju in vključevanju znanosti, tehnologije, inženirstva, umetnosti in matematike v sodobne izobraževalne programe. Letos se še posebej osredotočamo na osnovnošolske učitelje, saj želimo prav v tem obdobju izobraževanja okrepiti razvoj radovednosti, raziskovanja in ustvarjalnega mišljenja pri učencih. Naš namen je opremiti vas z naprednimi ter učinkovitimi metodami poučevanja, ki spodbujajo kritično mišljenje, ustvarjalnost in omogočajo prenos teh pristopov v vsakodnevno pedagoško prakso. Posebnost letošnje konference je tudi vključenost festivala robotike in umetne inteligence, zato ni slučajno bil danes tukaj humanoidni robot Neo. Festival izpostavlja pomen sodobnih tehnologij in njihove učinkovite uporabe v izobraževalnem procesu. Zdaj pa še k besedi vabim direktorico Andrejo Erjavec.
Jaz bom zelo kratka, lepo pozdravljeni v našem Tehnoparku Celje. Jaz sem izredno vesela pa zelo hvaležna, da ste se odločili obiskati našo STEAM konferenco, saj smo v zadnjem času se borili s tem, da smo imeli veliko odpovedi, so se pa moje sodelavke in sodelavci zelo trudili s pripravo programov in upam, da bo to, da smo se odločili organizirati konferenco v času festivala, vsaj nekako pokrilo manjko delavnic, ki smo jih zasnovali, in da boste uživali kljub temu pri prepoznavanju interaktivnih eksponatov, tehnologij in pa novih digitalnih orodij. Hvala lepa.
Umetna inteligenca vse bolj vstopa v učilnice in spreminja način, kako dostopamo do znanja, se učimo in poučujemo. Konferenco bomo pričeli s predavanjem, ki odpira razmislek o tem, kako v takšnem okolju ohraniti pomen praktičnega učenja, eksperimentiranja, napak in kritičnega mišljenja. Na oder vabim Moniko Rikić, katalonsko elektronsko umetnico, kreativno programerko, znano po interaktivnih inštalacijah, robotskih projektih in raziskovanju odnosa med človekom in tehnologijo. Predavanje bo potekalo v angleškem jeziku, tako da, Monika.
My name is Mónica Rikić. I'm from Barcelona, as I think you already introduced. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, well, this conference that I titled Unlearning to Teach, which is how do we face teaching, especially creative technologies, in this era of artificial intelligence, right? I said that I'm an artist, and you can see one of my works over here in the exhibition for the second time. Thank you very much for having me again in Slovenia. And I'm not only an artist, but I'm also an educator, and I think that everybody here is, so I'm guessing you're facing the same trouble with AI. Am I right? A lot of people, right? Are you secondary school, primary school, university, primary school and secondary school mainly, no? I think that's kind of like even more difficult. Like I usually teach, I mostly teach in master's program. I totally like, I cannot relate with undergrads anymore, so I can imagine like the gap with younger generations, it's even more difficult to deal with. I did a residency not long ago in a school in Barcelona with kids between 13 years old, and yeah, sometimes it can get a little bit challenging to motivate students of how to learn when everything is just a click of a distance, right? So this is kind of like a little bit of my practice, but I would like, and this is the work that you can actually see here down in the exhibition. And I would like to start a little bit explaining how I started working with creative technologies, no? How I learned how to deal with computers and how to use computers as a creative device. And like I mean, we have to kind of go back to the 90s. I'm about to turn 40 years old, so that's kind of like when we have to go. I always had an interest with computers, but we didn't own a computer, but it was back in around 1998, I think, when I traveled to the US, because my aunt lived there, and they told me there was a thing called internet. Okay, so I was like, whoa, okay, what's that, no? Internet kind of looked like that back then. I'm sure a lot of people would remember that. And I was like, whoa, what's that, you know? It's like, oh, you can navigate the World Wide Web, you know? So for me, it was just a screen, and I was like clicking, a lot of things. I was very fan of watching the Disney website. It was downloading very slowly, you know, everything was very slow and quiet. I also remember, I don't know if you had it here, but in Spain at least, when you were using the internet, you couldn't get phone calls. So it was like a confusing time, but it was also a very exciting time, and especially for me, because in my house, I had the computer, I had video games forbidden, but for me having a computer was also a way for sneaking and playing video games, because for my parents, they thought that computers were associated for work, right? They were things for doing productivity. That's what people think usually about computers, and they were used for doing school-related activities. So my parents decided to get me a computer and have it in a little room at the back of the house. But they did a very interesting thing that I see now in the distance. I didn't realize at the beginning how important that was. But instead of buying a computer or getting a computer if they open a bank account, that was also a thing in Spain, I don't know if you had it here, but they decided to call my cousin. He was 4 years older than me, I was around 12, 13, and they asked my cousin to build a computer because it was actually cheaper. And he was like fan of building computers, so we went to the shops in Barcelona, we bought the computer in different parts, and I remember like looking at my cousin like building that. Of course, he wanted to do engineer. Of course, he was a man. You know, he had all the checks of building a computer. You know, so I was just kind of watching, and there were like the motherboards and all the chips, and I was like, how can the Disney website come out from this? You know, like how does the Monkey Island like video game come out of this? I didn't understand. For me, that was magic. And it's something like only reserved for engineers. So, but I didn't, like, I just wonder, like I thought that I would never understand it, but thanks to that computer, I spent most of my teenage early years unsupervised in front of the screen, playing games, creating email accounts, playing weird games, talking to random people in forums, which now that I see it also, it was kind of dangerous, so creepy. And also, sorry to say that, but downloading a lot of music on Napster and creating CDs for my crushes in school. So basically that's how I spent most of my teenage years, and also as we were talking just now in the podcast with Masha, Barbara, and so back then also like internet seemed like a I don't know, like a window of possibilities where you could build like anything, and all these things could happen, and it was kind of exciting. But what computers weren't made for, at least what I thought that computers weren't made for, were for making art. And I always knew that I wanted to study art. So I enrolled in the fine arts degree. I thought that I was going to paint. It was a complete disaster. Nothing worked. I couldn't. It was very frustrating. I'm not a person to give up things, but I kind of actually thought about giving up the first 2 months because, artist paints and I couldn't paint, so what am I going to be if I'm not an artist painting, But then, I made friends, I stayed there, I was trying to do some stuff, and until around the third years of university, some a teacher told us about, I don't know if you see it, but it's Dreamweaver. Okay, so it was net art. Okay, so Dreamweaver, I don't know if you're related with this, it's a software for creating websites. Back then it was Macromedia, Adobe bought Macromedia, so that was the area of Dreamweaver, freehand, and all these things that we hardly had any in the fine arts school because computers were very rare also back then. But we had this teacher that was teaching us how to make websites that were interactive. And it was kind of easy. You just need to do like a boom, 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 like a square, you know, and I could make all these websites with a lot of GIFs moving around and these interactive stories through the internet. And also, I realized I really like to do animation, but for us, doing animation was also frame by frame, drawing on a piece of paper, you know, the typical art things that you do. And then I realized through Macromedia, that through Dreamweaver, that there was a thing called Flash. Okay, so back then, you were making websites with Flash. That's something that Apple just closed. You know, when Apple decided to create the iPhone, they were like, okay, we're not going to support Flash anymore, so that died. But it was a very interesting tool for creating animations and for doing kind of like more interesting things. But then I realized that you could go even farther with Flash by coding. And that's the first time that I linked everything. You know, it was like, oh, okay, I can actually use coding, I can actually use these tools that my cousin that is an engineer and that is building computers to create art. So that's kind of like made sense. And that was when I realized that for my artistic practice, it made sense to learn coding. Back then it was called, like, well, this is ActionScript, it's based in Java. So I could create my own video games to play in my house. And they were artwork, so my parents were kind of like happy with it because it was in a mixture between learning, working, and doing engineering, I don't know. It was like everything, so instead of playing. And I will go back to playing because I think it's something that it's very interesting, not only in my practice, but in teaching and learning. After, when I was still in university, apart from learning net art in the Fine Arts University, something else happened, which was that we had a teacher that it was in, the class was called Interactive Narratives, and I remember perfectly the moment, he had like an old-fashioned like blackboard, okay, like the green ones with the chalk. They don't, I think no one uses them anymore. I still have one in the masters I coordinate, but well, I think it's whiteboards now mostly, right? Yeah. So he didn't even show us that, he just drew the diagram of a chip, you know, and I was like, what is he doing? You know, it's like, and it's like, yeah, this is Arduino, and that was back in 2006. So it was around the time Arduino appeared, and he's like, this is an Arduino, and with Arduino you can feel the world and react to the world in a physical way, and I was like, like, are we going to get that? Because that really looked like my cousins, what I was doing with my cousins, right? When I was building computers. And he was like, no, we're not going to have them. But since you come from fine arts, you can imagine, you know, what you want to do, what type of magic you would like to do with this type of devices, and propose a project. But you're not going to have them. And I was a little bit disappointed because I already been doing a little bit of programming, you know, so I was like, oh, is it really happening? Like, is it really like in Fine Arts University in Barcelona, are they going to teach us to program? Spoiler, they still don't do it. Okay, it's more in design classes. Like, yeah, I don't know why. You know, I'm going there to give a talk, not in a couple of months, and they still don't do coding, which I'm still surprised. But anyway, so I was never. For me, as I said, I wasn't good at giving up and about not doing my dreams, so I refused to not do the thing. But since I wasn't going to get an Arduino, I imagined a way of creating the interactive project that I had in my head with the tools I had around. So I went to a place in Barcelona called El Corte Inglés, which is a mall center that is very typical in Spain. No one really goes there anymore, but it was very famous before Amazon and all. And you could go there, one of those, you know, those things that you put inside teddy bears and they speak, you know. So I found one that you could record your own voice and make things. So I took three old chairs. I recorded voices in that devices. I took 3 of the devices. I put them in 3 chairs, and when you would sit in the chair would complain about them not wanting you to sit, right? And actually, I'm not going to go through that because I'm not going to talk longer about my practice, but if you visit my work, this is something that kind of repeats. I do machines that complain about stuff, so the little exercise that I just made for the lack of resources of technology in the University of Fine Arts stayed somehow with me. So after that, I decided to learn, to do a master's in digital arts. And this was my final master's project. Actually, I'm very happy because it was quite successful. And also, I think I couldn't have made this project without my background in arts. And also without my background with working, because I used to work in the last years of university, I used to work in the Contemporary Art Museum of Barcelona, giving the guide tours, and especially with schools, right? So for me, that was very interesting. It was a way of teaching through arts and teaching like different things that really, really interested me, but also gave me an idea of what type of art I would like to make if I was an artist. And one thing that really frustrated me is like that you cannot touch art. You cannot touch art in the sense of like everybody needs to be like a little, even if it's interactive things, you need to be, things can break, you need to be very cautious and stuff. But I remember that we had some resources for teaching for giving the guide tours of the exhibitions in the Contemporary Art Museum. There was this educator that created a kit where you had it was a little box with little materials where you could fill the artworks that were exhibited, right? So for example, if you had like a Tapias, which is like a painter from Spain that it works with a lot of materiality, then you had like something that looked like a cookie, but it had like the same feeling, so kids could, in a way, touch things. So I became kind of obsessed with that, and also about accessibility, like how people that cannot see, for example, can experience art and stuff like that. So I decided to create an interactive work that it was called Build a Sound, where the output was sound, of course, build a sound. It was for building a sound. And it was built by all these 25 foam cubes that they had 3 different games in each of their sizes, and in the opposite sides, you had these image recognition codes that were called, it's a image recognition system called Reactivision that happened to be a system developed in the university I was doing the master's. Basically, you could do like animal sounds, you could do, in one side you could do animal sounds, in the other side, in the purple side, you could do a drum machine where you could do rhythms, it was like a sequencer of 2 seconds, and depending on where you were, oh, I have that? Okay, why not? Let's go with the pointer. How does it work? Okay, so yeah, so, the space was divided into a 2-second loop, and as you would put in like the different shapes, they would do like drums, blah, 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 and you were making music, and the other one was, I don't know if you see here in any pictures, but there's this part here that they were wrote, and you would build a melody. But the best part of this project wasn't building the sound, it was destroying the sound, right? So it was a very engaging piece for kids, they would love to build the sound and let's make all the animals, let's make a rhythm, let's make something, and then they would all prepare and they would jump and destroy a sound. And that was very cool because, as I said, you could not only touch the art, but you could actually jump on the art, and it was made of technology, but it didn't break, and it was, everything was hands-on by me, my mom, my aunt, and it was a family work, all the women involved. It was women making technology in a very, also historical way, right? Because sewing and machines and all is so related to computation. But well, this work was very successful. Actually, it was in the Ars Electronica collection, center, main exhibition for a couple of years. But especially in Barcelona, that was around 2010, people that were making art, they were very into conceptual art, let's say it that way, and people in technology didn't feel that this was technology. So I went to games, right? And that's actually when my educational practice also started, because in one side I was doing low-tech devices and gadgets with some friends. This is a video game that you play on an apron, and the controller is a fork. So I hacked a fork, then you were like eating, and you need to level your body, and depending what type of food you would be eating, it would detect what type of food was, and it was like levering your heart or your stomach or blah, 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 you know. Actually, a lot of people told me that it would be a great educational tool for teaching the kids how to eat well. Never did that. It was just a prototype. We were making vocoders with the phone game, you know. But then while I was making these things, I was also teaching Arduino to make little robots. I was teaching like VR, home decorated devices for mobile phones, or this is a puppet with a speaker, just hacking some postcards, those postcards that they sing, you know. Through these practices, through making games and through teaching kind of like playful experiences, I've learned a lot. So that, and going back to what I said before, for me, games have been super important, and playing, it's a thing that it's super important, because I always like to quote this essay, this manifesto of the abolition of work, that was written in 1985 by Bob Black, which is an anonymous name, that says that playing and giving are closely related. They are behavioral and transactional facets of the same impulse, the instinct to play. The player receives something by playing. That is why they play, right? But the main reward is the experience of the activity itself. The game, and it continues like this, the game is always voluntary, yeah, sorry. And it has, Bernie de Coven has defined play as the suspension of consequences, and this is unacceptable if it means that the game is inconsistent. It's not that the game has no consequences. That would be lower in the game. The point is that those consequences, if any, are free. So this means that the consequences in the real life, what I mean is that the consequences in the real life of the game are free. I mean, you can freely play whatever, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to make a change into your consciousness, in the way you experience life. Also for me, emphasizing the theme game over work of art, it was crucial for inviting people to approach the experience of the art in a more relaxed mindset. And this way, in this sense, I kind of found a way for explaining things through my artworks in a way that didn't appear like absolute truth or something like super serious, but something to engage with, like creating frameworks where people could experiment very different things. And coming from this work, from Build a Sound, I created the first, and I'm going to, okay. I created my first, let's say, like educational tool by itself. I never like used it too much. Then it's true that also like COVID times came. That was 2014. Then it had nothing to do with COVID. Anyway, it was kind of like a complicated piece to set up. But basically, Build a Code. It's a new version of the cubes, because the more I was exhibiting Build a Sound, the more I got educators telling me, oh, this could be also an educational tool. But I had a lot of imposter syndrome. I was very young, and I was like, I don't know what it is to teach, right? I don't have that much experience to know what I need to teach. But I know what I want to learn. So by that time, I really wanted to learn electronic music. But not just for making music, but to understanding how the music process of creating waves, of modulating waves, or creating samples, of creating MIDI sounds, worked, and especially with a software that I really like and I still use, that it's called Pure Data, which is a visual programming software that also called Max. And I was like, okay, I'm going to create a tangible programming tool with these cubes where I can be able to code or to create, like sound machines, automatic machines with just the cubes, and also, in a way, teach all the things that I'm learning while interacting and playing with the cubes. As you can see, the difference with Build a Sound is that it has a visual output, and for example, just as a little example, for example, if you wanted to create an oscillator of a sine wave, for example, you needed to put the wave, and then you need to put the pitch, and then you need to put the volume. And by this way, you know that you need to know the wave shape. You need to get the amplitude, and then you need to get the frequency. So these are the three things you need in order to create a sound, right? So I created like some workshops, for trying to teach young teenagers, more, because it couldn't be too young. I created this tool for teaching sound at the same time that I was kind of like learning. There was also like, for example, these interactions, that you would bang a sound. For example, a MIDI note, like playing a piano, but you would bang it like this, okay? So I tried to create like this educational interface, because for me, objects are very important, and this is how I developed my practice. I totally align with this description of the tools of conviviality from Ivan Illich. And I think that learning technology is super important, and just to understand kind of the world that we're in, and creating objects from art that would allow us to interact with this technology can help us and can help to teach others how to bring meaning to the world. So, not this, but all the things that I've been telling you before, for me, were before AI, like before mainstream AI chatbots appeared. The first project I did related to AI was actually these projects where these are these data gossiping robots. They are some robots that are gossiping around my data, and they were just an approach for I mean, like people just think that robots will, get conscious and then they will start to kill everybody. I don't think so. I think maybe they just want to, play alone, live alone, and maybe just gossip about our data or stuff like that. But the reason why I want to talk to you about this project is because for using this, I used a chatbot service that it was called Dialogflow. And it was made from Google, and it was very hard to implement. And this was 2019, okay? Now we are 2026, and I can say that this, like the nightmare, it started strongly around 2023, 24. Do you agree with me? When was that? When was that? When did chatbots enter the room? More or less, around that time, no? 23, 24? Okay. By this time, I was already teaching in the university. And the main question of all these, like the reflections and all of this thing is like and especially me, now that you know a little bit of my story, it's like coming from where we come as educators. How do we show students the importance of embodying STEAM concepts such as code, electronics, learning through hands, the materials? How do we teach them the frustration, to get frustrated, to take their time, to be bored, when all the instant answers are available just by asking? And I'm guessing everybody uses like ChatGPT or Claude, which are the main platforms, no? And I would like to, from here, I would like to share you a little bit of my thoughts about it and how I try to promote critical thinking and creative practices away from the computers, but using the computers in creative technologies. So, I was very naive for some time so these are some projects from my students, because I teach physical computing, basically. And this is a project that an undergrad student made. This is a project that a master's student made for an exercise, not a final project, just an exercise from a class. And I also teach fashion students how to work with electronics and fashions. So I have like 3 different type of students. For me, the classification would be people that undergrads are just people that happen to end up in your class, and maybe they don't end up doing that, so they are kind of like experimenting what they do. People from the masters are people that are, they apply to a digital arts master's program, so they kind of like want to do this, And then the fashion students, which are like, they are attracted by doing things that move, but they don't know anything about technology, okay? So I'm trying to find like different approaches with all of them. And for me, the most difficult, and as I said, that was the first type of group, and I decided to leave it for a bit, and especially because for me, I don't only teach physical computing, but I also teach open source and learning by doing, and things that now are not as much as in fashion or trendy as they were before. And I want to start with a trend and with a fashion that I think that maybe we should reflect on, which was the kid fever, okay? Was that our first error? like engaging in the kid fever. Like I've always been kind of suspicious about this type of kits that were sold for STEAM practices. I never, agreed to just giving people a thing to complete, because especially when you're trying to work from the perspective of creativity, you are kind of like, let me see how I wrote it here, because it was very, yeah, well, anyway. These things created a very specific imaginary of what technology, DIY technologies and DIY practices should be, right? Then we created some expectation. It's like if you build in a robot, the robot has to look like this, or you need to do something that it's for sometime soon, do some domotics. You call them domotics? Yeah, like assistive housing, or you can build things for making music, like in copying things that already existed instead of inventing new shapes or new ways of doing stuff. And I think, and my question would be like, where is imagination when everything comes in a kit? I think that the problem is that when STEAM practices are seen as a technical problem to be resolved, then AI is always going to win the teachers. AI is always going to learn the humans. It's like we don't need to, we stop getting lost inside the processes by giving them a kit that they need to finish. So if STEAM practices are seen, or education is seen as something that it's a finished outcome, then the fastest solution, which would be like asking of AI, will always win. And you can disagree, but this is my own reflections, but maybe we can talk about that a little bit later. I've always been, one strategy that I use for teaching students physical computing, as I said mainly, was to find new ways for creating new devices that would, like make them be interested in learning, things that, for example, I don't know if you teach electronics, but it can be very frustrating, especially when people are very used to working the screen, because you don't have, the debugging is very complicated, right? You need to actually build it, you can burn things, you can, there's a physical aspect that chatbots are not going to solve, and that can be frustrating, so I started, to bring balloons to class, and to create like, I don't know, flowers and stuff like that that would make them entertain. But how to teach without becoming entertainers. And I don't know if you have like the same feeling. As I said, I teach in a university, and I teach in a private university. Because in the public university, as I said, in fine arts, they don't teach coding yet. But I teach in a private university in Barcelona, in a design university. And I don't feel 100% comfortable with becoming an entertainer. Like, as you can probably see now, I'm very physical. I perform a lot when I speak things. I have a lot of patience. I don't mind repeating. And I can find ways of, bringing you a balloon and teaching you how to do the wings, and then by that teaching you how to create kinetic stuff. But I don't want to become an entertainer, because teaching is hard. Learning is hard, and it's an embodied process that the brain of a student needs to trespass from the unknown to the familiar, right? So there's no way out by trial and error. And this needs to be like trespass, and we don't need to be like clowns entertaining and getting attention, constant attention from the students. And sometimes I felt, I don't know if you agree with me, but sometimes I felt kind of like that way with what I do. This is one of the last exercises I tried with my undergrads, by trying to find these different levels, like this, trying to balance, this thing between entertaining and learning, and trying to make something fun and something that in the same way, was teaching them coding and stuff like that. It went kind of successful, but still, I still had like kind of like this thing, like, oh yeah, we need to make a car. And one other big difference that I found between teaching undergrads, that was last year, and at the beginning when I started like 7 or 8 years ago with undergrads, I think, is that before I feel that students had more personal ideas that they wanted to develop, right? They had like things like, I want to do this. And you could leave them to choose their free project. I'm not even doing that anymore in master's classes, you know, it's like it needs to be like super directed, and then from there, you know, from them some basics, then they can be like a little bit more experimental, let's say that way. So I feel, and I don't know if you feel like the same way I do, that teaching nowadays, it needs a lot of psychology. You agree with me? Yeah. But not only for them, not only for them, for us as teachers too. Right? Like I think there's, and I'm not blaming any of the sides. I'm just saying that things are changing a lot. And for me, for example, one thing that I struggle with, it's the communication with younger generations, especially. No, it's like I try to question, I do things, and you don't get direct answer or physical answers from bodies, you know. But I've started realizing that doesn't mean they are not interested in what you say. It's very strange, you know. It's like, so then I found some people that they were, or after teaching them, they were like, oh, your class was super interested, and I was like, I felt so lonely, you know, like I feel super lonely. It's like, I don't know if they like it or not, or what, you know, so it brings a lot of psychology. And also, for us, in the master I coordinate, but we are all the teachers, we are still fighting for making them see the importance of coding, right? The importance of programming, and not just vibe coding, like programming. And we need to like be very relaxed and say the things once, then say the things twice, like saying, for example, like, you're paying a lot of money for these masters. Maybe you want a human teaching you how to code, no? Or maybe you can try and do it yourself for an hour. And then if you don't get it, maybe you can ask AI, you know? So we are all, and we do like conversations, groups between us, you know, trying to see how do you do it, how you do you do this, right? And we also decided last year to do like a general update of the program, because we've been like nearly 9 years doing this same digital arts program. And the first the first thing we decided to do is don't fight against it. So, for example, we decided to add more content. So it's like, okay, if you're going to do vibe coding at some point, if you're going to code, or you're going to go quicker because you're doing AI, then we're going to do more programming lessons, and we're going to add new programming languages, okay? And we added things like computer vision with AI and stuff like that, you know, that they were fun, but we allowed them to use cloud in a way, but always supervised. And then we were like, okay, you're going to use vibe coding, you're going to code with AI, perfect. But then you have to explain me, or you have to comment every single line, and you will have to explain me what to do. So I want you to at least know how to read code. In the other hand, with my because I've been talking to you a lot about my master's students of the digital arts masters, with the people from the fashion masters, it's been better. You know, it's been a better experience. Actually, having AI in the room has been very good, because they are not, their superpower is not learning to code. Their superpower is creating all these garments around the technology. That's actually why they are there. So I teach them how to sew circuits, I teach them how to upload the code, and then I teach them how to prompt code. So from there, you know, they have some understanding of how to do things. So in this sense, just, you know, engaging with vibe coding and making them work outside the screen, and making them empower their superpowers of building things with fabrics has been really helpful and successful. Also, if someone is interested, there's an incredible resource online, open source, that it's called Kobakan, where you have like a bunch of soft circuits that are all made by sewing and by different fashion-related tools, with conductive fabrics, or not even, you know, with things that you can find at home easily. That can be very interesting practices to teach electronics, moving away from the kit fever. Another Another thing that for me is super important, and also because this is for, like as I was telling you, I teach physical computing, but so for me it's very easy to work outside the screen, you know, to close the computer and work in coding. We've also applied it with different practices. For example, this is, you cannot see this very well, but this is not only visuals, but sound programming with Super Collider and P5JS. So getting into practices like computer vision would help to, you know, to merge these two physical worlds, so they necessarily will need to be outside the screen to code this type of stuff. And also, oh no, I will talk about that later. And also an exercise that has been working very well, and now for I think like around 5 years, with no, 3 years or 4 years, we've introduced classes of coding without computers. So it's just computational thinking. For us, like before they touch a computer in our masters, they do computational thinking, which is how to learn how to think. It's not computers thinking, it's how humans think to talk to computers. So we try to make them exercises on paper about coding that they will need to execute with their own bodies. Okay, so it's kind of like teaching code through performance. In this way, we've created like dynamics for learning what are the variables, what are conditionals, you know, what are loops and stuff like that. So anything that you could do, or at least that's what has worked for me, like anything that can make them work outside the screen, it's better for them going back to the screen. And last but not least, embrace life practices. I can say that performance has had a very nice impact on us. It has helped a lot for them to understand, also like working with recipes and stuff like that. Then you see them like connecting the dots after some time. But for example, one of the things that one of the assignments we have for music and for video is that they have to do live coding. Do you know what live coding is? Yeah, everybody? Well, live coding is a practice where you create music and visuals coding. Okay, there's different programming languages that you can do that with them. And there's an event that happens every month in Barcelona that it's called From Scratch. So artists, what they do is they start with a screen in like blank screen, and they start typing code, and by typing code, some images, one programmer makes images, and the one coder does media, artist makes images, the other artist makes sound, and they have to start from scratch and code the sound and code the video. So I always tell them, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you will have to remember how to code, because it's from scratch, you know, so you don't have anything, you know, so at least they memorize and they kind of like get excited about having like this performance live in front of people, you know, by creative coding. So that has been a very nice thing. And also for, I don't know if you do visual programming through your STEAM classes, but we've used to do a lot of processing, and now we've changed to P5 Live, which is processing live, which also gives kind of like the same experience. It's like coding, but you see the effects on real time, and that also has promoted like a lot of engagement with coding. And just to end, I would like to end up with this thing that just happened yesterday. And I would like to, we've talked about one error about the kid fever. And I think that another error that I've seen, and especially in my university, as I said, like all the entertainer, the idea, you know, and working in a private university, which is a very big error that is, as a society we're making, is thinking about an education in economical ways. And us also, for having a master, we're having a lot of pressure with getting students, you know, so that has been very complicated. And I think that we just have to think about education outside from the economical mindset. We need to understand that things take time. I like to tell my students that things go slow, that you don't have to rush, you know. One of my goals with education now is to make people get bored and deal with it, to make people be frustrated and also deal with it. Because I think that education, it's not at all about being productive, and art is either. That's why I think artistic practices are so good for teaching technology, but they are about experimenting and learning from an embodied practice. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monica, for your creativity and also be willing to share your knowledge in an engaging way. It was really educational. Thank you very much. Na tej točki sam bi še želela povedati, naj bo to srečanje, priložnost za izmenjavo idej in novih spoznanj pri soustvarjanju sodobnega izobraževalnega pristopa. Sedaj sledijo delavnice. V zadnjem delu prostora so sodelavci, ki vas bodo usmerili do delavnice, na katero ste se prijavili. Stopite prosim do njih. Hvala.